Hello, thank you for joining me. I want to talk about modernity. Well, specifically the modern world as of the late 2010s that we are now in. Um, what I don't want this video to be seen as is some sort of Luddite protest. I am certainly not one of these people who sort of takes the view that everything modern is bad, everything contemporary is bad, and everything old is good. Far from it. Um, I'm not one of these people that sort of think of the good old days and things were perfect. Of course not. Um, and in mediums like film and music, I like old music and older films. I also like contemporary film and some contemporary music. But it's more perhaps more abstract issues I want to discuss. Things like the influence of social media today is profound. We can't escape it. Now, I would be a hypocrite if I said that, if I totally rejected it because I use it. I'm using it right now with YouTube. But, and I also use Facebook often. I can't quit it because, well, I could, but it would create problems. I'm connected with a lot of people there. Um, but I feel that we live in an era where there is instantaneous reaction to everything. What I mean by that is that, take for example, the 24-hour news cycle. This is definitely something that's a phenomenon that's developed recently. People play judge, jury, and executioner, trial by media. It's not an entirely new phenomenon, of course, particularly in the years when yellow journalism was developing. Even 100 years ago, of course, people were quick to pass judgment without knowing all the facts. So I'm not suggesting that's an entirely new thing, but there does seem to be a tendency today for people to be instantaneously judged, public figures to be instantaneously judged. And it's not that human nature has not always been judgmental, it has, but the implications are different today because we're more interconnected than ever before. So, for example, if a politician or a singer or an actor or any other public figure hit controversy 100 years ago or even 50 years ago, I would suggest, yes, that reputation will probably follow them around, but there would still be a medium for example, private discussions. There would still be a medium for a certain degree of privacy that doesn't exist today. There would be a scope for a certain degree of, I suppose you could say, breathing space. Today, every single thing is all it takes is to be exposed online for something, for some imperfection, then you're finished. And I think that is an utter tragedy. I think it's symbolic of the intensely politically correct era that we live in, and I think that is a huge problem. But I think it's in a sense we're less forgiving today of people's shortcomings, and I think that is cause for alarm. I am not for a second saying that if people, for example, make controversial statements, if they say something that is insensitive, that they shouldn't be held to account. And again, I'm not suggesting that's an entirely new thing. There have been examples of public figures saying controversial things in the past, but I really do believe this instantaneous reaction is something relatively new. And if we really want to be consistent with this, if we really hold these standards to a level of consistency, then every single time any one of us has said an angry comment in response to a thread on Facebook, then that's going to be held against us if we ever get successful in whatever interest that we have. That so and so said this in 2017. Um, there's certain fields, obviously, it matters. I mean, for legislators, it does matter how they interact with their constituents. what their attitudes are to the wider society. Of course, it matters. But I think it's more important to judge people on what their present views are rather than what their past views may have been. Far more important. But I also feel that there is a good deal of hypocrisy in how we judge others. I mean, and I'm not innocent in this. I'm as guilty as anyone else. I've judged others. I've come in with comments, and this is not something. It's I'm going to turn 32 in a few weeks, and one of my kind of birthday resolutions is to be a little bit less interactive in terms of following news media. And the reason for this is because I'm actually a little bit drained of constantly getting worked up by one thing or another. Now, this is something that I can take control of. I can limit my how much I look into news media because there isn't a day goes by when there isn't something winds me up, and it isn't healthy. I'm being absolutely candid about that because I don't think I'm the only person that can resonate with this. I think there are other people out there, perhaps who are watching this video, who think, yeah, there's not a day goes by. It doesn't matter what the issue is. That isn't what this video is about. Forget whether it's left wing or right wing or whatever the issue is. I think there's a lot of people that find that there are a lot of things that, and I think the big networks really, really, really do like to stir things up. I'm not saying they shouldn't report controversial issues, but when you see big networks reporting the same issue once and then 5 hours later they report it again, you can tell the purpose is to try and get a reaction. So obvious. And what I'm going to do is unsubscribe from some of these pages, not because I don't want access to what's going on. I want to be aware of what's going on. And I don't believe, people say, oh, I find out for myself. I don't believe that that's possible. I don't think it's practically possible to find out the truth by yourself completely. We do rely to a certain degree on mediums, and I think it's a little naive, with all due respect, to say otherwise. But I want to limit how much I take that in because there are a lot of things that are beyond my control. Then what's the point of getting worked up about it to the point where, I can't do anything about it? I'm hugely grateful that is this medium that I can speak my mind, but I do think maybe I'm subjecting myself to be completely candid about it, things that wind me up just too much. I'm so drained of all the political correctness, but I'm also drained of bigotry. I'm also drained of ignorance and prejudice and all the rest of it. So I think this is what I'm driving at when I say that there are frustrations with the modern world. There is a loss of innocence in some ways, if that makes any sense whatsoever. There is a sort of, we live in a very, very cynical era where people are so quick to judge, like, and say it's for, they're only doing it for this reason and they're only doing it for that reason. And the problem is that it's so deeply entrenched that we ourselves cannot entirely become immune for it. So then we end up being cynical. I end up being cynical about cynicism. So I do feel there is a somewhat loss of innocence. I suppose I mentioned that didn't want to talk about modern music versus old music. I don't believe in sweeping statements like, oh, all modern music is bad and all old music is good. Certainly not. But that's an example. I mean, there is a huge reliance on sexual innuendo in modern music. So perhaps that's an example of a loss of innocence. Even as recent as the 80s, there was not that reliance on sexuality. Now, I'm a red blooded male. I like an attractive woman as much as the next man, but there is that reliance and it's overt and it's too much. Um, and it isn't just female artists, you get it with men as well. There's just so much, there's a lot of crudeness out there, and there's a lot of, I don't know. I feel that as a society, as in general, it's not about being more politically correct, it's about being more civil, civil to each other. And we all have culpability in that. It's not to say we shouldn't get angry. It's not to say that we shouldn't be vocally unhappy about injustice. But I feel that just, I suppose I'm trying to amalgamate a lot of issues into one here. But basically, what I am saying is that there seems to be, human society seems to be more complex than it's ever been. And I don't know if that's an entirely good thing. And I certainly wouldn't say, well, let's get back to the 50s, things were great. Certainly wasn't. There was racial segregation, there was genuine discrimination going on, and there was things that, you know, we should welcome as being part of the past. But I think there is an obvious reason why retro is popular. What I mean by that is, particularly in Anglo speaking countries like Britain and the United States and Canada and Australia, there is a big fondness for decades past. So you see, for example, 1950s themed diners, you see 1970s discos. I think one reason for that is a genuine fondness for the culture, for the music, and so on. But I also genuinely believe there is a sense that somehow innocence has been lost. Now, like I say, it would be very naive to say, oh, that time was innocent and today is not. Of course not. That would be absurd. But human society is more complex than it's ever been. And sometimes I think we need to step back a little bit and think, are we relying too much, for example, on social media? Are we relying too much on this instantaneous reaction to every single thing? Now, I'm not going to be a hypocrite. I'm not going to stop using Facebook. I'm not going to stop um, voicing my opinions. But I just want and would invite people to reflect on these things and also reflect on the fact that we read too much into things. There's too much cynicism out there. I, for my part, am going to try hard to improve myself. I want to try hard to do that. To maybe sometimes I'm too negative, I'm too critical. So there's a lot of areas we can all improve, and yeah, those are just a few things to reflect on. Thank you for watching.